Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be talking about my latest book, my seventh book on Power BI in the last 5 years, Microsoft Power BI Cookbook third edition, and it's in color, which I'm really excited about. Now I know I did a video on this earlier, but that one really just I was just showing the table of contents and that. I figured I'd do more of a behind the scenes kind of thing, so you can understand some of the book, writing and publication process. And also, I want to kind of show you just how, even though the recipe name may be the same, just show you how much that the recipes have been overhauled and worked on. There hasn't pretty much been a recipe or a page in the entire book that hasn't had something done with it in order to try to improve it and make it better, for the readers. So now, before we get into all that, though, I would be remiss if I didn't call out this is one of the most important pages in the book, people. These are all the people, that worked on this book, and I worked with some of these people directly, almost daily. Sometimes Amisha and Gebin and Vignesh, right? Some of these people are Gaurav. Some people are Deepayan. I'm going to murder the names. I'm sorry about all that, but and some of these people I never actually worked with. So like Tehal Sony, never worked with that individual directly, but I appreciate their work because it's, if I think I said this in another video, there's one thing that I, really value in a book, it's a good index. That is, it's the one, if I had to level a complaint about the, optimizing DAX book, which I get it, it's like 800 pages in a brick, right? But that's the one complaint I have is it doesn't have an index. And that's one of I found myself the other day. I'm like, oh, I'll just go and I'm like and I couldn't find the index, so I had to took me a lot longer to find the information I was looking for. So I really appreciate a good index. So you know I'm sorry I never got to work with you directly, but I appreciate the work that you put into this. It's not it can't be easy putting together a good index on a book, I don't think. Um, and then we got the author page, but again, I want to shout out to Aaron Otrosky um, as one of the reviewers for this. Andre was also another reviewer. This is early review copy, so I'm assuming a lot of this stuff got fixed in terms of the formatting and that. And Ricardo Perico, right? Appreciate all the work that they went into reviewing the book. Lots of great comments, come back because these things go through a first draft and then, a multiple, cycles of revisions. And these people, they help out a lot. Check the accuracy of the information, right? And catch all the things that like from the first draft until the second draft and third draft, the things that have changed in Power BI, and now it's not this, it's this, or this image has changed a little bit. Microsoft changed the UI for this, so really appreciate all their efforts in all of this. So, all right, so I'll show you this. This is my folder. So I have a folder for each book. To my books folder, of course. And say it's not great organization, but it's not the worst. So you have your previous chapters that you get, from the previous edition, and then of course I have my new chapters, right? That I write and all that sort of stuff. Then revision folders and all of that. And then, I've got and I keep all my PBX files and basically all the data and content I keep in here so that then I can load that up into GitHub easily, later on. Um, I've learned a few things in writing these books over the years to at least keep some sense of decent organization because it helps out a lot. But the first thing that we do in this book, which is a little different than like Definitive Guide to Power Query M, is we had to invent the table of contents, right? So for the Definitive Guide to Power Query M, which is a lot of work, it took a lot of time. So this was a lot less involved because basically, like I took a crack at it and Brett took a crack at it. Went through just a couple of revisions of this, but I think became the final kind of working table of contents that we started with. And things change, right? Things change when you're writing the book. You're going to find that maybe I can consolidate these recipes into one, or that recipe really doesn't add any value. So, but what we did is, everything needs to be touched. And then these green highlighted ones these are going to be new recipes within the book, right? And then these are going to be ones that we're more than likely going to remove. And then the yellow ones were like, hey, those need special attention. Um, either a major overhaul or we might want to drop that, something like that. But you can see, like in chapter one, we've got 4 new recipes, and we're taking out one. This one has 2 new recipes, maybe taking out one. And so this goes on for the rest of the chapter. But what you really want to get from this, though, is there's a lot more green than red, right? And this book, in order to get it to be printed in color, we needed it to needed it to fit into 600 pages. And that's including index and front matter and all that stuff. Okay. So the old book, the second edition, came out at like 617 pages. Um, and it was, we were going to add 2 new chapters to it. Even though it'd be 14 and 15, but numbering got off of there a little bit. And there's a lot more, recipes that we wanted to add than what we wanted to take away. So this was at the forefront of my mind during the entire book publishing process because I really wanted this to get published in color and contain all the information that we wanted it to. And I think how it came out is that we got it into like 598 pages, right, with the index and everything else. But we did have to put 1 chapter online. 1 chapter is going to be an online chapter only. Because otherwise, the book would be 650 pages, and then we wouldn't have been able to print it in color. But we wanted to keep the content. And the chapter that was selected for that was the old chapter 10, Administering and Monitoring Power BI. And I chose that chapter because I felt that it would apply to the least number of people using the book. Was the thought process behind it. Of all the chapters, if we were going to need to put one online, I wanted it to be one that not everybody is an admin of their Power BI tenant, right? But everybody everybody's going to be creating Power BI desktop reports. Everybody is going to be ingesting data. So we didn't want to put those. I didn't want to put those online. So this one made the most logical sense to me as for the online chapter. So that was the one that became. We did have to do one online. So we were able to squeeze and I'll show you some of the techniques and what we did with it. We just squeezed a tremendous amount of information into that 598 pages, including a brand new chapter, which you'll see here the chapter on Fabric and Power BI Premium. We consolidated what was originally going to be kind of like 2 chapters. I just decided to just put it all into one. So, all right, so let's take a look at this, and I'll show you how I'll do this. This was the draft for chapter 2 on the second edition. Okay, so I'm going to put these up here side by side, and then this is like the first or second draft of the third edition, same chapter. Okay, and so as you'll notice here, like originally we were viewing and analyzing M functions and managing queries and data sources. We were going to keep those, but as I got into it, I decided to collapse the essential information about these recipes into, well, it ended up becoming like importing data and some other recipes throughout the book. And you also notice that we did some reorganization of the recipes. I thought it was a lot. I thought it was a lot more logical to start with importing data and then go to direct query and then data flows versus direct query importing data and then filters and blah, blah, blah. So I tried to reorganize these and keep that in mind so that the book flowed more logically and easier for people. But you'll notice, like, even though this is importing data, even though it covers kind of the same ground, right? So this is importing data, and it's got some of the same verbiage and that sort of stuff. When you get into the recipe itself, it starts to change quite a bit. So like the getting ready, I think it's much more clear and easier to approach than it used to be. Like create an import data source query called 80 works DW. This one is much more specific. Get data from the home tabs like SQL Server. So I think these directions in here in the third edition, I think are really a lot more clear and a lot more step by step for people. They make it easier to follow. Like this one has you coding, some M code, if you will. Whereas this one kind of stays out of that for the most part. Plus, again, being in color, all of this is going to be a lot more clear with the red, highlighted and what you want to take a look at. But you can tell that the recipe itself has changed significantly, right? Even though it kind of covers some of the same ground, this has been changed quite a bit. And it actually incorporates, um, like, for example, some of this stuff was in um, other queries like the viewing and analyzing M functions and the managing queries. Like for example, here, right within this recipe, I have you moving the queries into groups, right? So instead of having a whole separate, you know, um, recipe in the book about how to manage and organize your data sources, I basically incorporated all of that stuff into throughout the rest of the recipes, and give it to you in kind of chunks. But again, there's the query dependencies view and all of that, and I try to incorporate as much of the information from these other recipes as I could. But it really helped out because I could drop out some of the the see also and other things, and it allowed me to kind of condense the information. Because again, we're trying to fit this thing into 600 pages. But again, I didn't want to lose all that good information and explanation and everything. So, if you compare, if you get the third edition, you have the second edition, you'll be able to see, a lot more clearly than me just scrolling through, or just how much like this recipe has changed. And I think a lot how much better it is and clearer it is, versus the previous edition. That was a real focus for myself and Brett. I've been, Brett and I have discussed this and had, talked back and forth via comments and things like that, about, some of the recipes from the first edition, and even the second edition were super involved, and very technical. And we wanted to try to kind of, in a lot of steps and just very difficult to achieve in some cases. You had to do a lot of work in order to get the recipes to come out the way that they did in the book. So it was a big focus of us to try to simplify this, try to make it as clear as possible. I think one of the other big things, that is better in this edition is of all things, it's kind of maybe it's a little silly, but it's just the organization of the GitHub repository and the naming conventions. Like I think in the second edition, I did this with Dax Cookbook too, and it's like, I don't know why I didn't do it this way to begin with, but like the chapter two, like these are the actual names of the recipe. So it's not like recipe one and recipe two and recipe three, right? So I think it makes it a lot easier to find the information, gives you a starting point, gives you a reference point. Um, and even in some cases, like chapter four, for example, there's like a chapter four start, where you can open that up. And so instead of having to do all the prep steps in terms of getting your data model together, because this one is really more about building visuals, and building reports. So you can just go ahead and start with chapter four start and kind of skip all of that, without, and just making your life a lot easier and a lot easier to work with in the book. And that's, there's some of these recipes in there, the recipe will have a start and a finish, right, within the chapter in terms of the recipe in that. So yeah, here's an example, like, right, capturing user selection with parameter table start. And then this is the final version. So this gives you, instead of, makes it a lot easier to start the chapter verses. And that was one thing that I noticed in the second version, was like there was a lot of duplication in terms of, okay, go build your data, go import this, go import that, organize the thing, build your data model relationships. And that was just for the getting ready section. So to alleviate all of that, it's like, okay, go download the start, PBX file. Okay. And now you're ready, right? It's a lot easier, I think, for users to, pick this up and be able to go through the recipes. And if they want to dig into the start and how it was built and everything, go for it. But if you're just interested in just, okay, how do I do this this recipe, and how do I accomplish this? I think this is going to be a lot better and a lot easier for people to pick up and do. So a little bit behind the scenes. Again, a lot of work that's gone on to this by Brett, myself, but also everyone from Pact, all of the all the reviewers and that. So I appreciate everybody. I really appreciate the support that it's been shown on LinkedIn. When this book was announced, it got officially published yesterday. The response has been tremendous. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited about this book. I hope you can tell. It's like having it in color, it just adds a whole different element, and I'm just super excited about it. And it's nice to see all that hard work and that paid off. I don't know if you oh, I forgot to show you this. I'll show you this just as so this is so once you get your table of contents in line, you get a project schedule, right? And Pack puts this together. You got your vacation plans, everything else, but they give you a schedule, and so if you notice these dates right here, these were the same dates that we were doing Definitive Guide to Power Query M. Pretty much, there was a lot of overlap. In fact, the Definitive Guide to Power Query M got published at the end of March. So this was when my first drafts had to be delivered. And then after, and I got them all delivered on time. I know authors are notorious for not meeting deadlines, but I think I missed a few deadlines early on, and then I caught up, and then was able to deliver all my first drafts by the 6th of March, this year. And then after that, right, the editors get a hold of it, and the technical editors, and again the reviewers, and it goes through multiple rounds of drafts, and then you can finally get the thing published, which happened yesterday. So super stoked. Anyway, that's all I had for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you got to see a little bit behind the scenes, and I'll see you next time.